Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi. Baruch Hashem, today we begin a new Masechet, Mishnayot Masechet Maaser Sheni, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Now as a general introduction, Maaser Sheni is a tithe that has to be separated from produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael during the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. The owner of the produce keeps the Maaser Sheni, but he must eat it in Yerushalayim. If he does not want to carry his Maaser Sheni to Yerushalayim, he can transfer the sanctity of that Maaser Sheni to money, which then he brings to Yerushalayim and uses to buy food that he's going to eat over there. The Torah in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 27, pasuk 30, labels Maaser Sheni as Kodesh LaHashem, sanctified to Hashem. So the Mishnah today is going to list a number of restrictions that apply to Maaser Sheni because of its sanctified status. Now, generally, as a point, when we refer to Maaser Sheni, we mean anything that has Maaser Sheni sanctity, which could be either produce that was separated as Maaser Sheni, or money to which that sanctity was transferred, or food bought with that money. And the Mishnah begins, Maaser Sheni is subject to the following halachot. En mochrin, one may not sell Maaser Sheni. The Mefarshim explain the Mishnah forbids the type of sale where the produce remains Maaser Sheni and the buyer is responsible to eat it in Yerushalayim. If, however, the sale is intended as a chilul, a transfer of sanctity, which sometimes we call pidyon, or redemption, meaning the sale will transfer the sanctity from the produce to the purchase money, and the seller will take that money to Yerushalayim and buy food, that sale is permitted and even encouraged when a person is unable to carry all of his Maaser Sheni to Yerushalayim. What the Mishnah is forbidding is where the produce is going to remain Maaser Sheni and the buyer is going to have to take it to eat in Yerushalayim. Then memashkenin, one may not use Maaser Sheni as a security for a loan, and the Mefarshim explain when a person lends money, he may take an item from the borrower to serve as a security for the loan. If the borrower fails to repay the money, the lender keeps the security. Maaser Sheni produce cannot be used as such security. Then machlifin, one may not trade it for another item. Now, although a person can eat his Maaser Sheni, it doesn't truly belong to him, but rather it belongs, so to speak, divine property, belongs to Hashem. Therefore, the person who holds it does not have the right to make transactions with it. And Mefarshim explain, the ownership of Maaser Sheni is actually a machloket, a matter of dispute among Tanaim. Rabbi Meir holds that Maaser Sheni is mamon gavoa, divine property, meaning Maaser Sheni doesn't actually belong to the person who holds it. It is really God's property, and the person who holds the Maaser is permitted, or in fact obligated, to eat it in accordance with certain guidelines. Our Mishnah is following the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Therefore, our Mishnah holds that Maaser Sheni may not be sold, may not be given as a security, may not be traded, because a person cannot sell, give as a security, or trade an item that doesn't belong to him. Rabbi Yehuda, however, the Mefarshim point out, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He holds that Maaser Sheni is mamon hediot, property of the commoner, meaning Maaser Sheni belongs to the person who holds it. He has to follow certain guidelines in the way he uses it, but it is his property. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that a person may not sell Maaser Sheni, give it as a security, or trade it, but for a different reason. Not because you don't own it, but because it's disrespectful to use a sacred item in such ways. The Mishnah continues, Velo shoklin kenegdo, one may not weigh other items against Maaser Sheni, meaning a person may not use Maaser Sheni as a weight on a scale in order to determine the weight of something else, because it is disrespectful to put a sacred item to such use as a weight. The Mefarshim explain, just to understand what it means to weigh on a scale, a balanced scale has 2 pans suspended from a bar. A weight, which we call an object that's known for weight, for example, a coin that weighs 1 ounce, that's placed in one pan, and an item like food is placed in the other pan. When the pans balance, we know that the food weighs the same as the weight. Maaser Sheni cannot be used as a weight. And the Mishnah continues, V'lo yomar adam lechavero b'Yerushalayim helach yain v'ten li shemen. Even in Yerushalayim, a person may not say to his friend, take this Maaser Sheni wine and give me oil in exchange. Now, although a person may spend Maaser Sheni money on food in Yerushalayim, he may not exchange Maaser Sheni produce for different food. And the Mefarshim explain, when the Mishnah first said that a person may not trade Maaser Sheni, it referred to doing so outside of Yerushalayim, where it is forbidden to buy anything with Maaser Sheni, because the Mishnah said, "En mochinoto, and mamshekinin oto, then machlifin oto." We may not trade it. When the Mishnah said we may not trade it, it was referring to doing it outside of Yerushalayim, where you can't buy anything with Maaser Sheni. The Mishnah now adds, when it says, "V'lo yamar adam lechavero helach yain v'ten li shemen," the Mishnah is adding that even in Yerushalayim, where you can buy food with money of Maaser Sheni, meaning money to which you transferred Maaser Sheni sanctity, it is still forbidden to exchange produce of Maaser Sheni for other food. Now, until now, the Mishnah referred to standard Maaser Sheni, meaning produce obligated in Maaser Sheni by Torah law. And the Mishnah adds, "V'chen shar kol haperot." All these activities are likewise forbidden for all other kinds of Maaser Sheni produce, even those that are only rabbinically obligated in Maasrot. And the Mefarshim explained by Torah law midoraita, only grain, grapes, and olives are obligated in Maasrot. Most other forms of produce are obligated in Maasrot midrabanan, by rabbinic law. But again, the Mishnah is telling us all these activities are forbidden by all the other kinds of Maaser Sheni produce as well. The Mishnah says, but people may give each other Maaser Sheni as a free gift, meaning it is permitted to invite someone to a meal and serve him Maaser Sheni produce. And the Mefarshim explain, it's only this type of a gift would be permitted, because since according to our Tana, Rabbi Meir, Maaser Sheni is Mamon Gavoa, divine property. The person who holds it doesn't have the authority to give it to someone else as an outright gift. All he can do is to grant a guest permission to eat it, since the right to eat it is a privilege that does belong to him. So, Mifashim tell us that only this specific gift, you can invite somebody to your house and serve him Maaser Sheni as food, but you cannot give it as an outright gift. Now, since the Mishnah refers only to inviting someone for a meal, then it uses the term free gift instead of a gift, because a meal, the Mefarshim explain, interesting to note, is truly something given for free without expecting anything in return. An outright gift, on the other hand, is usually given in exchange for a favor or received or hoped for. And that is an Abotai of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now continues. Now that we discussed whether it is permitted to sell Maaser Sheni, the Mishnah now discusses whether you are allowed to sell two other types of sanctified items. The first one is Maaser Behema, the animal tithe, which the Mefarshim explain. Every year, a person must set aside 1 out of every 10 cows, sheep, and goats that were born in his flock that year. The animals that he set aside are sanctified. If they have no physical blemishes, they are brought as korbanot, as offerings. If they are blemished and therefore unfit to be brought as korbanot, they may be eaten as ordinary meat. And the Mefarshim tell us, we know that an animal that has any of certain physical blemishes, mum, is not valid to be brought as a korban. These blemishes are described in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 22, Psukim 21 to 24, and Bechorot, chapter 6. Now the Mishnah is going to discuss whether animals that are Maaser Behema, they're actually sanctified, they don't have any blemishes, whether they may be sold. Maaser Behema, an animal that is Maaser Behema, is subject to the following halachot. En mochinoto tamim chai. One may not sell it if it has no blemishes and is alive, in which case it would be brought as a korban. And the Mefarshim explain the same applies even if the animal is no longer alive. The reason the Mishnah specifically said a live animal is because the first halakha taught in the next Mishnah, in the next section, is going to apply only to a live animal. So it's a stylistic thing. The Mishnah mentioned the live animal here in order to contrast the two halachot. So en mochinoto tamim chai, one may not sell it if it has no blemishes and is alive. Really, we said even if it's not alive, because in that case, in the case where it is alive, it would be brought as a korban. V'lo ba'al mum chai v'shachut, or if it has a blemish, whether it is alive or slaughtered, in which case it has to be eaten by the owner. And the Rav says that the prohibition of selling Maaser Behema is derived from Psukim in the Torah, and even in this case where it has a blemish, and whether it's alive or slaughtered, it has to be eaten specifically by the owner himself. Then mekadshin bo haisha, one may not perform kiddushin on a woman with any Maaser Behema animal, because the kiddushin has the same laws as a sale. And the Mefarshim explain one way for a man to be mekadesh a woman is to give her something of value. Masechet Kiddushin, chapter 1, Mishnah number 1. It is forbidden, however, to use Maaser Behema for this purpose, because a kiddushin, an act of kiddushin, is similar to a sale. A person gets something, so to speak, his wife, in exchange for a payment or a gift. Therefore, the Rav says, just like Maaser Behemah may not be sold, it may not be used as Kiddushin. The Mishnah now is going to discuss another type of sanctified animal, the Bechor, a firstborn male cow, sheep, or goat, which is known as a Bechor. It must be given to a Kohen. If it is unblemished, the Kohen brings it as a Korban. If it is blemished, the Kohen eats it as ordinary meat. So the Mishnah now is going to discuss whether a Kohen may sell a Bechor that he has given. Ha-Bechor, a Bechor is subject to the following rules. Mochin oto tamim chai, the Kohen who receives it may sell it if it is unblemished and alive. Ubal mum chai v'shachut, if it is blemished, the Kohen may sell it whether it is alive or slaughtered. Umikachin bo isha, and a Kohen may perform kiddushin on a woman with any of these bechod. The Mefarshim explain, when we said mochin oto tamim chai, the Kohen who receives it may sell it if it is unblemished and alive. That halakha, this halakha applies nowadays when the Beit HaMikdash is not standing, because since the Bechor cannot be brought as a korban, when it is given to the Kohen, it simply becomes his personal property. Unlike Maaser Behemah, which specifically the pasuk there said you can't sell it. Here, there is no pasuk that forbids the sale of a Bechor, and therefore the Kohen may sell it. But when the Beit HaMikdash stands, when it will stand, B'ezrat Hashem, a Kohen may not sell an unblemished animal, because although it's given to him, he must bring it as a korban, as a sacrifice. It doesn't become his personal property, and therefore he may not sell it. In addition, an unblemished Bechor nowadays may not be slaughtered. The Kohen must keep it until it develops a mum, a blemish, and only then may it be slaughtered and eaten. Because if it was slaughtered while unblemished, its meat becomes forbidden for benefit and it would have to be buried. Therefore, the Mishnah said only that a live, unblemished Bechor may be sold. Because if it was slaughtered, it may not be sold because it would be forbidden for benefit. That's why the Mishnah said, Mochin oto tamim chai, unblemished and alive. Because if it was unblemished and slaughtered, you wouldn't be allowed to have benefit from the meat, you'd have to bury it. And the Mishnah continued, Ubal mum chai v'shachut, if it's blemished, the Kohen can sell it whether it's alive or slaughtered, because the blemished Bechor is always the Kohen's personal property to eat as ordinary meat. Since no pasuk forbids its sale, the Kohen may sell it. And we said again, Mikachin bo isha, Kohen may betroth the woman with any of these Bechor. The Mishnah now returns to the Halachot of Maaser Sheni. Like we mentioned, a person may transfer the sanctity of Maaser Sheni onto coins, which he will spend on food in Yerushalayim. The Mishnah now lists a few types of coins that may not be used for this purpose. En mechalin Maaser Sheni al asimon. One may not transfer sanctity from Maaser Sheni to a blank coin, which is a coin-shaped piece of metal that has no official image imprinted on it. V'lo ala matbea sheno yotzeh, nor to a coin that cannot be spent, meaning like a coin from another country that's not accepted in the place where he is. V'lo ala ma'ot shenan birshuto, nor to money that is not currently in its possession, meaning coins that are not accessible, even though they belong to him. For example, the Mefarshim explain, if one's purse of money fell into the sea, he cannot transfer his Maaser Sheni onto the coins in the purse, even though they technically still belong to him. And the Rav tells us all these halachot are derived from Psukim in the Torah, Sefer Dvarim, chapter 14, Psukim 25 to 26, like it brings down the Gemara Baba Kama, page 98a. And that is the Rabotai, today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.